Good afternoon. This is Jim Shetler, and I think the attendees are starting to level off. I'm going to suggest perhaps we get started. And Tony, did you want to kick off?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Congratulations in getting this far. Andrea, would you like to take the roll to ensure a quorum?
Yes. Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Here.
East Bay Community Energy,
Here.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Here.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Here.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Here.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Here.
Central Coast Community Energy,
Here.
Marin Community Energy.
Here.
Thank you. All are present.
And we do have a quorum. The next agenda item that we have is selection and appointment of the board chair, vice chair, and secretary. And I'd leave that to the board to lead.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to select Gurish Balachandran for chair, Don Weiss for vice chair, and Braun Legal for secretary.
This is Sonoma. I would second that motion.
We can have a voice vote of the board. We don't need a roll call vote on this, particularly since we can all identify each other here by virtual purposes.
Okay. So that would be a yes
So,
then.
all in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? The selection and appointments are made.
Right.
Mr. Chair, I turn
Yeah.
it over to you.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you, Board of Directors of CC Power. Welcome to our first meeting. And so just going to the agenda, we have quite a few items on the agenda, but I expect that most of them will get dealt with in pretty rapid manner. And I expect we'll have more discussion on item 6I. So our attendees will have a chance to talk about that, and the board also. On item 4, matters subsequent to posting the agenda, we don't have any additional matters. Item 5, public comment. We have received 4 letters from the public so far, and there have been some corrections to the letters that have been sent out to the board. These have now been posted to the website, the corrected versions that came in as late as about 10 minutes ago. So public comment on any item that is not on the agenda. Is there any public comment? And I believe if we do have public comment, you can raise your hand. I do see that there's someone who has said, do we need to call in for public comment, or we do that during Zoom? I think it'll be during Zoom, and you can raise your hand as an attendee at the appropriate portion of the agenda, and you will be called on for providing 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes of public comment. Thank you, Alex Landsberg, for that question. Andrea, I don't see anyone from the attendee list who has raised their hand, so we will now move to the regular agenda item. And so item 6A is to consider and possibly approve resolution 21201, the appointment of the interim general manager and interim general counsel. And on this matter, for the last few months, we have been working with Jim Shetler and the Braun and Blazing firm to help with standing up CC Power. And in front of the board is a recommendation to continue with Jim Shetler and Braun and Blazing on an interim basis, while an ad hoc committee is formed to hire a general manager and general counsel using a board directed and having the board do that. For that ad hoc committee, I would propose that Tom Habashi, Don Weiss, Lori Mitchell, and myself be on that ad hoc committee to hire the next general manager and general counsel. But that's not the matter. So if any of you have any issues with the appointment on the ad hoc committee, please raise it. Otherwise, we will move to the actual resolution of the appointments. Tony, do you have anything to add before we get some comments from the board?
Just that I'd like to emphasize the interim nature of this and the importance of that board directed process for selecting successors.
So the way we'll handle this is we'll have questions from the board, then we'll go to public comment, come back for discussion with the board, and then move to a vote. So any questions from the board? Not seeing any. Any public comment on item 6A? Not seeing any hands raised, I'll bring it back to the board for discussion. Any discussion by the board?
Sounds like we have no discussion, so I'm going to move approval of having Jim Shetler be appointed as interim general manager, as well as Tony Brown Legal as the general counsel.
So we have a motion.
I'll
Can we get a second?
I'll second that.
That would be Matthew Marshall. All right. Any further discussion?
Just have a minor clarification for the record, for the listing in the resolution that MCE should be listed Marin Clean Energy instead of Community Energy.
Okay. Thank you. With that correction, Tony, I believe we have a roll call vote for this.
We do, and I'm going to go by organization for resolution 21-02-01, selecting interim general manager and general counsels for CC Power. Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
and Marin Clean Energy.
Yes.
The resolution carries.
Thank you, Tony. Moving on to item 6B. Now that we do have an interim general manager, I'd like to have him make a report. So Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. First of all, thank you for considering me for the interim position. I appreciate that. Chris, can you bring up the slide deck when you get a chance, please? While you're doing that, let me also extend my congratulations to the members. A lot of hard work went into getting us here, and much appreciate your efforts. It's an important date for us. And then I found out yesterday that yesterday was an important date for our chairperson, in that he managed to survive another year. And so I thought I would offer up on behalf of the organization our congratulations, a happy birthday, somewhat belated, and also extend our appreciation for your leadership in getting us this far. So happy birthday, Girish.
Hey, old man.
You should speak. Yeah, thank you, though.
Look at you to join our ranks, man.
Yes, I'm there.
Me and Jim.
Yeah,
There's
back to you,
nothing
Jim.
wrong with getting old. It's the option.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah, thanks for embarrassing me. And please
You're
continue.
welcome. I'm sure I'll pay for it later.
Yes,
Chris, let's go ahead and move on with the next slide, please. So as Girish has noted, and so as Tony, this is our kickoff meeting for CC Power. Very much an administrative meeting. So we will be dealing with a lot of appointments and contracts and getting organization structure in place. But also we have some time on the calendar for board discussion on policy development. I know this is an interest for not only the board members, but as was noted, we have public comment on this. And just want to make clear that this is a discussion item on the calendar. We were not seeking any board action at this committee or this meeting. Also want to make sure everybody knew that the website is up and operational. Probably will be refined as we move forward, but the basic functions are there. And meeting postings and so forth are available on the website. And then I thought I'd take a moment and just kind of update where things are at on the long duration storage project. So next slide, please, Chris. So as we move forward with the project, as we've discussed with the members, we are looking at forming a ad hoc project oversight committee made up of your technical commercial needs from each one of the organizations. Each participant will be representative, will have a representative on the oversight committee. And we do have requests out for selection. I think I have one member yet that needs to identify their candidate for the committee. Looking at trying to get that kicked off next week. So your designated reps will be hearing from me shortly. The concept of the oversight committee is it is advisory to the JPA. So it's the participants' ability to advise the JPA on negotiations, project selection, and so forth. It also provides another important function, and that is a communications channel back to each participant so that each organization is kept up to speed on what is happening on a real-time basis and not waiting for formal meetings. Right now, we would look at the initial efforts of this committee when we get set up next week will be to help finalize the shortlist recommendations and also be working with the negotiating team on the negotiating principles that we would want to use when we start negotiations. And then for the longer term, it would be advising the negotiating team as we move forward in the middle of negotiations on any issues that come up and any recommendations that we want to make in those. Major project approval will be brought back to the board. So things like shortlist finals, contracts with the developers, participation agreements, and so forth would be brought back to the board for approval. And I did want to note that we do have an outreach planned with the California ISO on the 26th. There'll be, I've been asked to participate along with a couple others from, including Girish, to update both the board president and the CEO on the latest status of the LDS project. Next slide, please. So many of you are aware of this, but I thought it'd be worthwhile to update since we're in a public session. We did receive a very large amount of offers to the RFO, over 9,000 megawatts of capacity, over 300 different unique pricing offers. We did have a variety of technologies that were offered up, highly focused around lithium-ion batteries as the majority, but also a good range of other projects. The evaluation process has been underway for about 2 months now. The selection criteria and weighting is shown here. The first round of evaluations are essentially complete. We're in the process of looking to narrow down to 15 projects for a second round of evaluations with a goal of bringing back a shortlist recommendation by the mid-late March timeframe, and hopefully for a decision around projects selection in April to allow us to initiate negotiations. And we have had a sub-team working with the negotiating team on some of the negotiating principles. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be bringing those to the oversight committee for concurrence and discussion. Any questions, comments from the board on just overall update or the LDS project at this stage? All right, I think next slide, Chris, I believe, yep. So that ends my general manager's report, Mr. Chairman. I will turn it back over to you.
Okay, any questions? Well, I'll just go. Any questions from the board? I see Matthew has his hands up. Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, I was just going to request that we post these slides to the webpage for reference and for the public.
Yes, sir, that would be my intent, is that when we post the minutes with the slide deck would be included in that. We will do that.
Yeah, and let me ask if there are any questions from the public. I don't see any hands raised, so I'm going to go back to thank you, Jim, for that update. And let's get to item 6C, which is to consider and possibly approve resolution 21-0202, which is setting the regular meeting dates for 2021. And my understanding of this is by law, we have to establish at least one meeting a year. And this is the meeting that we've had. So from a compliance standpoint, we're okay. But we'd like to set up a schedule, knowing fully well that if there are changes needed, we could have them. But we do have a schedule that's in the staff report, and we have 6 additional meetings that have been laid out in the staff report, and it's also in the associated budget. Questions from the board, and let's go with Jeff first.
Just a quick question for council. When we establish this regular calendar, if we add a meeting or move a date, does that make it a special meeting, or can we agendize it far enough in advance that it doesn't have to be?
We can agendas it. You'll see in the resolution, we provided the secretary flexibility to make changes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, members of the public, any questions? Not seeing any, I'll bring it back to the board for discussion. And I don't see any, so I'll entertain a motion.
I'd make a motion to adopt resolution 210202, setting a regular calendar.
I'll second it.
Thank you. That would be Jeff and Jan. And any further discussion? Not seeing any. Could we have a roll call, please?
Resolution 210202, establishing regular calendar, Sonoma Clean Power.
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy.
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority.
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy.
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy.
Yes.
Central Coast Community Energy.
Yes.
And Marin Clean Energy.
Yes.
The resolution is approved.
Thank you, Tony. And now moving to item 6D, and this is going to be the standard for many of the items coming up. I'm going to hand it over to Jim Shetler to introduce this item to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Chris, could you pull up the resolution 210203? One of the requirements that we have is to establish a treasurer for the organization. We also will need accounting services to handle managing the cash for the organization, paying bills, et cetera. And we also need to designate a business address for the organization. 3CE has offered their services to do so. They are offering to have Tiffany Law be the treasurer controller for the JPA. We've also worked with them for a contract with Mayor Accounting to provide the accounting services for the JPA, and will be using 3CE's address as the at least initial business address for the JPA. So we would request that the board authorize the appointment of Tiffany Law as the treasurer controller, and approve the contract with mayor for the accounting services for the March through the end of this year. And then designate 3CE's address as the business address for the JPA. With that, I'll take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Not seeing any questions from the board. Any public comment on this item? Not seeing any raised hands, I'll move it back to the board for discussion.
This is Matthew. I'll make a motion that we approve resolution 210203.
I'll second.
Great. Matthew and Dawn, motion and second. And can we have a roll call vote, please?
Sonoma Clean Power,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Marin Clean Energy.
Yes.
The motion is approved and the resolution carries.
Thank you, Tony. Moving on to item 6E, which is resolution 0204. It's designating our fiscal year and approving our 2021 budget and initial cost allocation methodology. Jim, would you take us through this item, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Chris, could you pull up the slide deck, please? And let's go. I thought it would be worthwhile to walk through at a high level the proposed budget for the board rather than wade through the details of the budget document that's in the packet. Next slide, please. So we are establishing a budget for 2021 of a little over $500,000. It's mainly split into two categories. One, about 80% of that is for support for the LDS project. And we'll get into a little bit on what the details of that are. And then the other is general or overhead, and that's dealing with the routine setup and operations of the JPA. Next slide, please. So we did go through some fairly detailed assumptions in creating the budget. That is in the draft budget packet. Wasn't going to go wade through the details of those. But I did think there were a couple of items that were worth noting. One is for the LDF project. The estimate is based on pursuing 3 projects for negotiation and contracts. There is a 10% contingency included in the estimates. And then for cost allocation for the general budget, we went in with the assumption that each member would pay an equal share. So right now there are 8 members that have signed the agreement and have been approved to go forward with the agency. So right now you'll see the budget is divided by 8 for that. And then for the LDS project, what we're initially looking at is the members identified up front some target capacity that they thought they would want from the LDS project. And so we're allocating dollars based on the percentages associated with those target capacities. Next slide, please. So we have laid out a monthly cash flow projection for the budget for both the general categories and the LDS project. So GM, the general manager support, the upfront amount in March is related to efforts around setup and initial development of procedures and policies. The $1,100 a month is related to months where we have board meetings, and the 500 is just non-board meeting months. GC is general counsel, so similar, identifying the projected costs for the general counsel. Support includes both webinar development and the accounting support. And the heavy upfront has to do with the setup of the web page. And then for the accounting, we split the accounting about roughly 1/3 general, 2/3 to the project, because most of the contract and dollar flow will be project related. Then under the LDS project, we do assume general manager and general counsel support, overseeing the ad hoc committee, reporting back to the board, involved in the development of the negotiating principles, contract development, et cetera. The support here is primarily the accounting function I mentioned before. And then the negotiating team is related to 2 contracts we will be entering into for negotiating support. And again, these are based on the assumption of 3 contracts that we will be negotiating, and the contracts for those will be coming up shortly. And then you see the totals for this. Next slide, please.
Hey, Jim, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
I just have a question on the last slide
Sure.
for September. It looks like in the general counsel item under general in September, there's a bit of an uptick in the month of September, which makes sense on the LDS project front, but I'm not sure how that applies under the general category. Can you explain that?
This had to do with well, maybe I ought to turn it over to Tony.
Don, the thinking was that the administrative matters associated with the preparation of that meeting would be higher than average, right? Because that's the estimated time frame in which we might be considering adoption of the contracts. I guess there could be a reasonable discussion as to whether that should have been accounted for in the LDS project category, but our thought was in the general meeting preparation and packet preparation and review of documents that it was administrative and general function.
Okay, yeah, thanks for sharing that. It seems like if it's related to the LDS project, that might be a more appropriate place for it. But I'm open to following your lead on that or hearing a bit more.
But what I might suggest is we'll go back and review that. I did mention this up front. We know we'll be making modifications to the budget as we go forward. We know we have potentially 2 more members that will be joining. And then we also know that once we go through the short list and participants identify which projects they wish to be involved in at what level, we'll also have to adjust the LDS project budget. So we do know there's probably at least 1 or 2 budget adjustments that'll have to be made. So I'll work with Tony. We'll look at that. And when we bring the next budget update back to you, we'll identify that and discuss that.
That sounds good. Thanks.
Yep. Next slide, please, Chris. So I wanted to give a sense on what the allocation looks like and potentially what cash calls will look like. So I'm primarily focused on what I'll call the total 6-month cash call. And the approach we're suggesting, that's one we use in other environments, is that we would probably do 2 cash calls a year, 6 months out. And based on participants right now and where we're at with the target capacity, this gives us what the first 6 months of allocation will look like. So gives you an idea what that first cash call will be looking like when we arrange for it. And then the last column just indicates, based on the budget as it's formulated right now, what the total commitment would be. Again, this will change as other members join and as we finalize the selection of projects.
Are we 10 members or just 9? I'm seeing 10 names listed in here.
It's my understanding that VCE is has moved forward and will be becoming a member.
Oh, okay.
So yeah.
And there's a question from Jeff.
Yes.
Yeah, I think for this item and the next, I just have a question about how we're formally asserting that our member CCA is participating in this phase of a project. And I think I think we're all clear because we've had prior discussions before the formation of the JPA about where we are. But I think it's really good to have us make a formal declaration of that from time to time when circumstances change, and that be publicly known. So if you haven't already thought that through, it's a request of mine that we know exactly who's participating and when, and also the conditions on that participation. Not just that it's today, but also that an attestation that we're participating now means that we're committed to X numbers of months or dollars worth of expected fees. And if we opt out later, we're still on the hook for something. So in other words, I think you've probably thought this through, but I just want to say that out loud so that we're all clear as we go along. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. And I think it might be worthwhile to pull the resolution up.
Okay, and then after you deal with that, we have Don Weiss with a question too.
Okay. So how we have looked at this is by approving the resolution. A yes vote by each member is committing that member to the expenditures that are in the budget and the cash calls. Now, that can be adjusted in the future if it's agreed to by the board. So as an example, we have potentially 2 other members. If the board approves those 2 other members joining, then the budget would be adjusted, and through resolution, the board would approve that, which would adjust the members' contributions. But once the resolution is approved, it is the expectation that the members have committed through the period of the budget. I don't know, Tony, whether you want to add to that or not.
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, Jeff, we have your question, and but so we have at least one answer right now. But let's go to Dawn and then Tom Habashi after that.
Great, and my comment is maybe just an add-on to Jeff's, and maybe along the same lines. But I think this resolution makes a lot of sense. I understand why we need to move forward with adopting a budget, and the general budget sounds fine to commit to at this point. But just kind of layering on to what Jeff said, I think since we don't yet have a LDS project drafted, we don't know what the terms are. It's hard to commit in advance to a budget for participation, not knowing. And I realize we've got a little bit of a chicken and egg problem here. So I'm open to recommendations on that. But I wonder if we may want to just approve the general budget and view the LDS budget as a kind of a placeholder projection. One other thought is that, depending on how the shortlisting process goes and the negotiation goes, it's my understanding that we may have a couple of different projects, LDS projects, come out of this process. It may not be with just one. We might not all be participating in the same one. So we may have a budget that looks a little different, if we end up with 2 or 3 projects. So not sure the best way to handle that, but I just want to make sure that that's raised.
Yeah, if I may just add a comment before we get to Tom Habashi's question. It is a chicken and egg, Don, in the sense that we are already working on it, right? And so the cost that we have incurred so far has been under the cost sharing arrangement, and that's kind of going to morph into CC Power. So there's work, even the analysis that we're doing to shortlist from the dozens and dozens of projects those need to be funded. And so as we move forward, and so far it's going, I think we are looking at it based on how much each of the 8 of us have expressed interest. So we have a target megawatt that we've expressed interest in. I think maybe melding your 2 questions together, it's maybe what you asked for is like, it's more of a commitment. Hey, here's what we need. Here's what we are committing to for what we had called phase 2 of a project. So phase 1 was exploratory, which we've kind of done with RFI. This is phase 2, where we're actually moving toward shortlisting. And phase 3 is going to happen at the end of the year, where we'll actually sign on the dotted line of 1 or more projects. So this is essentially the funding of phase 2 to get us there. And yeah, so I think we are trying to do both with one resolution. And yeah, Jim, any suggestions on what was suggested of like trying to do maybe 2 separate approvals, or we just move forward with one?
So my comment would be this: the dollars that are in the budget for the LDS are dollars that we intend to start spending in March and April, and recognize that who participates and how those get allocated will change over the course of the next several months as we identify shortlist projects, selected projects, and who's participating. But we at least need to have dollars in place to start the negotiating process and get the 2 consultants engaged and be ready such that come April, hopefully we can get to our final selection and start the negotiating process. Now, I'm not necessarily hung up if we want to split this into 2 resolutions, but I don't think we can view it as an advisory budget for LDS because we will be looking to start spending money for relatively quickly.
Okay.
Now, maybe one other thing we can think about is whether we want to authorize it for rather than the full year, maybe a portion of the year out to August or September. Haven't thought that through completely, but that may be one option.
I'm seeing some nods from Jeff and Dawn. So maybe we'll keep that as an option, and we come back, you know, maybe there would be a motion that's different than what's proposed over here.
I think
to
that was
have
just a
budget
head
approvals.
scratch from me, so you can
Okay.
ignore my nod.
All right, so let's get to
There was a
Tom
nod
Habashi.
from me, a thumbs up. It's a good
Okay.
idea.
Okay, Tom Habashi.
Yeah, actually, I was going to resonate with what both Jeff and Don said. I think maybe one way to resolve this is to have the commitment for the long duration funds or budget valid through the end of June, at which point there will be reallocations, adjustments, people dropping off, people staying on. And at that point, the budget that you have, again, for the project between July and the end of the year is contingent on the reallocation and the adjustments that need to be made. So I think if we try it that way, then you probably will address the concerns that have been raised, because I think we're going to make up our mind well before the end of the year how much we want to get into and which projects we're going to get into, or if we're going to get into any of them. Yeah, for some they may just flat out drop out of the whole thing, and you don't want those folks to be committed all the way to the end of the year, but you do want them to be committed up to a point where we have got to a point where identified a smaller number of projects that we need to start either negotiating with or do a deep dive on.
Okay, I would maybe just add that maybe September may be a better time frame, given that we may have a change of GMs right around the June timeframe. So we may want to have a actual budget that goes forward as opposed to having one more item that we have to toss in the air right around the time we're changing GMs. So anyway, I'll just leave that here and see, ask Jim, are there other things you want to cover in your presentation?
No, this summarizes the presentation.
Okay.
The only other comment I would make, and I would lean towards the September date, is I think it's important we give the consultants a sense of how long they will be engaged in this. So at least knowing that we're funded, whether we end up, doesn't mean we can't stop the contract with appropriate notice if we decide not to go forward. But I guess it is good to give the consultants at least a sense on what they're contracted for.
Okay, and we'll come back to this when we come back to discussion with the board. But let me ask if there are further questions that the board has of Jim. Not seeing any questions. Let's entertain public comment. Are there any members of the public who would like to make comments? Not seeing any, I'll bring it back to the board for discussion.
I think the September idea makes sense to me. And so I would move the item if others consider that a good idea to approve through September.
So Jeff, I think if I may just ask, so it would be the LDS project budget through September and the general budget through December.
Correct.
Okay, so we have a motion from Jeff.
Second.
And a second from Tom. So LDS through September and general through December.
Oh, what I might suggest, just looking at the resolution here, and bear with me, I'm doing this on the fly.
Okay.
But item 2, approve the CC Power 2021 insert general. And then after December 31st, put and LDS project budget. March 1st through September 30th. I think that's what I heard.
That matches my motion. Thank you.
Okay. And then as long as I've got the floor here for a minute, I did want to note that there are a couple other items that are on this resolution that I didn't touch on in the budget discussion. One is establishing the annual fiscal year. We're proposing a calendar year. The other is that we're proposing that the board approve the allocations as currently identified, recognizing those will change once we understand who's involved in what projects. And then as a result of this, authorizing the treasurer to do an initial cash call.
And those amendments can be incorporated into my motion. I accept that. Thanks.
Okay. And so Tom, you're good seconding this amended motion?
Do we need to make a change to 3 as well, or is it understood that that the allocation will be subject to final commitment by the members to the project? I mean, I think I understand it that way,
Yeah.
but it's not reflected in the resolution or in the table, the attachment A.
I'm thinking about wording here for just a minute.
About subject to final allocation.
Something
Of
like
project
that. Yeah,
capacity.
subject to final allocation approval.
Project capacity. Yeah.
Jim, you good with this?
Yes, I think that captures the discussion and I'm good with it.
Okay, and
Go ahead,
Tony?
Mr. Chairman, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to go back to Jeff for his motion
up.
and second. Okay, thumbs up. And Tom? Second?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, so as written,
Jim, would you like to, I have it written down, but you were the primary author. Would you like to read the amendments to the relevant provisions of the resolution?
Sure. So the resolution as amended amends section 2, which now states that the general budget will be approved for the entire year, but the LDS project budget is only approved from March 1st through September 30th. And then item 3 is modified to note that the existing allocations will be modified subject to final allocation approvals. The other sections remain the same.
okay. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Sonoma Clean Power,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Marin Clean Energy.
Yes.
The amended resolution 210204 is approved.
Could you please show that again? Can you slide it back up so we can see that on the screen? Okay. I just want to note that March through September is 7 months.
Okay, so yeah, that the cash call is for 6.
Right.
The cash call is for 6 months, but March, April, May, June, July, August, September is 7 months. So
Yeah, so that's the approved budget. What we wanted is the treasurer should have money in the bank to be able to pay bills. So it's almost like the startup cost, just getting the cash call so there's money in the bank to pay these bills. But the commitment is for 7 months. Yep.
Understand. Thank you.
All right, so we'll move now to item 6F, which is to consider 2 consultant contracts for the LDS projects. So Jim, would you please update the board on this item?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris, could you pull up the resolution, please? So we do have 2 consultants that have been working with us through the initial funding agreement to help with both the evaluation and preparation for potential negotiations. We felt it was only logical to continue with those 2. So it's Carrie Bentley and Kevin Fox. And we have engagement letters from each of them for the effort. I will say that the funding for them in the contract assumes support through the end of the year, but the majority of that funding is through September to get through negotiations. Obviously, there are cancellation notices available to us, so if we elect not to go beyond that, we'll have abilities to deal with that. So what I would like to suggest is the board approve that the board chair enter and approve the contracts for Gridwell and Keys and Fox.
Okay, any questions from the board? Not seeing any questions. Any public comment? I'll bring it back to the board, not seeing anyone from the public wanting to make comments. Jeff?
Wanted to note I've been really impressed with what I've observed from both of these firms. And I really strongly support this. I think they're obviously experienced, very professional folks, and I would make a motion to move this item.
Second the motion.
Sorry, who seconded?
This is Nick.
Nick, thank you. So Jeff and Nick, any further discussion from the board? Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Sonoma Clean Power,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Marin Clean Energy.
Yes.
Resolution carries.
Thank you, Tony. We'll now move to item 6G, which is to consider and approve the selection of a vendor for website development and maintenance services. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Chris, could you pull up that resolution? So we have worked with Silicon Valley Clean Energy, their IT staff, and along with a contractor that they have for development of the website. The website, as I noted earlier, is up and running. It is pretty basic, as was intended. We have the ability, though, for this technology to expand as needed. The other part of this contract is to eventually work with a vendor to look at coming up with a logo and so forth for the agency. We haven't expended those dollars yet. We'll do that later when it's appropriate. But the dollars that are in the budget cover this contract arrangement with Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and we would recommend that the board approve the arrangement.
Right. Any questions from the board? Not seeing any raised hands. Any public comment? I'll bring it back to the board for discussion and possible introduction of a motion.
This is Matthew. I'll move we approve resolution 210206.
I'll second.
Thank you. That'll be Matthew and Tom making the motion and seconding. Any further discussion? Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Sonoma Clean Power,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Marin Clean Energy.
Yes.
Resolution carries. I'd like to add that we've had to work with Silicon Valley's IT team in this sort of startup phase, and really appreciate the efforts above and beyond to move these things so quickly to enable the website for this initial meeting.
I would
Thank you.
second that. Girish, your staff has been excellent to work with on this and extremely responsive.
Fantastic. Now everyone knows what an awesome staff I have. So that is wonderful.
It is in the name, you know, if you guys weren't good at IT.
Good point. Good point. Okay, moving on. And so, yeah, Pam, Colleen, Nick Zanato, a core group of people who really work very hard on it. And Pam has done a ton of work on this personally. So, all right, so let's move to item 6H. It's a delegation of authority to the board chair and vice chair for approval of invoices. Jim, would you take us through this resolution, please?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris, yes, please bring up the resolution. So now that we have a budget and an accounting function, we do need to have someone that can authorize expenditures. Since we are operating under an interim general manager, And normally I would suggest the general manager provide that function, but because we're startup and under interim general manager, we're recommending that either the board chair or vice chair have the authority to approve budgeted invoices for payment. And so we would request that the board authorize that.
Any questions from the board? I see Jeff has his hand up. Jeff?
I appreciate your your note, Jim, that you're interim and that therefore you're asking the board chair to approve these. But I just want to call out, as staff of a CCA myself, of a JPA, when a budget's been approved by my board, having the ability to make payments in a timely fashion is much more efficient than waiting for a board meeting or going to my board chair. And so I just wanted to question that and test it. And if I'm wrong, go ahead and go down this path. I have no problem with this path, but I just suggest that I think when the board has visibility into the budget, has considered the budget, and has voted to approve it, whoever's serving in your seat, I would assume, should be able to pay the invoice. So that's my bias. That's it.
I greatly appreciate that input. I agree with you 100% that if I was not in an interim position, I would probably be pushing to have the general manager do this. And when you do select your general manager come June, I would think you might want to revisit this, because I agree. I think it's more efficient, and the board has approved the budget, so you do have the visibility. And certainly you can request your general manager to report out on a monthly or whatever frequency, whatever approvals that he's made. So I agree with you in the long term. I think that's the right way to go.
And I would note that this is exactly the conversation we had internally before making the recommendation that we did, erring on the side of conservativeness because we're a new startup entity, obviously, and the interim nature of the GM position as it now stands. And we've been fairly successful in other areas in expediting the approval process and hope that that's manageable. But we would expect fairly soon to come, as the policies for the agency are developed, the delegation authorities would follow in that tranche of additional paperwork, so to speak.
And to be clear, I've got no problem with this. I just wanted to flag that, but thanks.
Appreciate you making the comment.
Yep, and I'm sure Don and I will also appreciate being kind of off the hook on this. And I think it's more just as a startup, right? So we're going to see a lot of change. So thank you for the question. Any other questions from board members before we go to public comment? Not seeing any public comment on this item. Not seeing any, I'll bring it back for discussion and entertain a motion. For
I'll move
0207.
approval. This is Jan.
Great.
A second.
Jan and Lori, any further discussion? Not seeing any. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Sonoma Clean Power,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Marin Clean Energy.
Yes.
The resolution carries.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will now move to item 6I, which is a discussion on development of policies for CC Power. And I'm going to hand it over to Jim Shetler to take us through what's in the staff report. And as all the board members have seen through emails that you have received, there has been public comment on this. So I'll just frame this just a tiny little bit. We will have public comment and then, bring it back. Also, I'm going to propose that we form an ad hoc committee to listen to the input, incorporate it, and so that we can bring back policies to the board for action in the coming months. The ad hoc committee that I'm thinking of to help us with this would be Nick Chassett, Jan Pepper, Jeff Cyphers, and Matthew Marshall. So with that, I'm going to have Jim take us through what he's developed for us on
Thank you,
policies.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Chris, could you pull up this slide deck again, please? So as I mentioned during the general manager's report, this item is brought forward as a discussion item for the board. We're certainly not ready to propose any action yet on the board or for the board to take, but we did want to frame this. In addition, prior to formation, we did have some discussion on policy development among the members, and there were various thoughts and ideas that were put forward. So in framing the white paper that we sent in the packet, we try to draw on that prior discussion and put forward a couple of ideas to at least seed discussion with the board members. So Chris, if you could bring up the next slide, please. So in the white paper, we've come up with 3 potential options for consideration by the board. One is at this stage, maybe we develop some high-level policy principles. And then as we move forward, we would develop specific policy statements on areas where needed and necessary, such as for principles we might want to incorporate in the negotiations on the LDS project. The second option is to adopt a formal policy statement around some key issues, such as labor, environmental, and diversity. And I want to extend the thanks to Jan Pepper. She offered up some language, which I did some minor tweaks on and included in the white paper as a potential example. And then a third I thought about was perhaps a hybrid of the two, which is we do adopt a formal policy statement, but rather than immediately go into policy development, perhaps we take the approach of option 1 and develop policies as needed. Next slide, please. So option 1, I pretty much explained it. Again, it's use the policy principles to guide us during the formation, and we would develop detailed statements as necessary. Next slide, please. Option 2 would be to adopt a policy statement. This is an example of what that might look like. And then we would develop the more detailed policy statements in a focused manner. And then the third one, Chris. Again, the hybrid I talked about, a little bit of both, trying to go ahead and have a policy statement, but again, developing the more other detailed statements as needed, and maybe take over that first year or two to figure out what those are. So with that, I'm suggesting, Mr. Chairman, we turn it back over to the board. You may want to get your public comment at this time before the board takes up its discussion.
Yeah, I think there'll be quite a bit of discussion, public comment, and then, but right now, are there any questions from the board for Jim? Okay, not seeing anything, any questions right now. Andrea is going to manage the public comment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So looks like we have currently 4 people who would like to speak. We'll begin with Thomas Enslow, followed by Rick Benia. So Thomas, if you would like to unmute yourself, your 3 minutes to speak will begin as soon as you're unmuted.
Thank you, Andrea. Tom Enslow. I'm an attorney for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Unions, Local 6 and 617. We submitted a letter yesterday which inadvertently listed the wrong locals. I submitted a corrected version that clarifies that our comments are submitted on behalf of IBEW Local 6 in San Francisco and WW Local 617 in San Mateo. Local 6 and Local 617 strongly support the adoption of formal CC Power policies to ensure that CC Power will do a few things. One, to seek to award contracts and negotiate contract terms that will ensure payment of prevailing wages on projects that are constructed pursuant to power purchase agreements or energy storage agreements. Ensure that any construction projects directly contracted by CC Power members pursuant to negotiations by CC Power are constructed pursuant to a project labor agreement. Support local hire and local businesses. Support inclusive business practices, and ensure consideration of environmental and equity impacts. We also support having CC Power adopt policies against negotiating agreements for unbundled renewable energy credits. We appreciate you guys putting this on the agenda and taking this seriously. We think you're starting to move in the right direction. But what's important is that we have policies that, not just general policies, but we also need to clarify how those policies will be implemented. Policies need to be integrated into the project development and negotiation process, for example, through RFP conditions such as prevailing wage requirements for bidders, and through requiring submittal of information by proposers and how they meet these policies, so that we have sufficient information to evaluate potential worker, environmental, and equity impacts of proposed projects when deciding which projects to choose. The letter we submitted sets forth 7 specific policy proposals that have been drafted in consultation with community and environmental stakeholders that also share our concerns. And we respectfully request that CC Power board members present these policy proposals to their individual CCA boards for consideration directions. We feel that policies adopted by the CC Power board need to reflect the guidance provided by the publicly elected board members of the underlying members CCA. Now, one of the concerns, I think inherent concerns people have about this JPA is that it's run by unelected staff and consultants, and that inherently diminishes local control and is contrary to the CCA structure of having elected officials make these procurement decisions so they're held accountable by the public. For that reason, we also support creating a public advisory committee to ensure transparency and public engagement in CC Power's operation and procurement practices. And we appreciate the expertise and the passion that the board members bring, but we feel there needs to be community involvement in this process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Thomas. Next, we will have Rick Bonilla, followed by Diane Bailey. And Rick,
Hey,
would like to unmute yourself?
Thank you, everybody. Good to see you here today. My name is Rick Bonilla. I am a member of the board of directors at Peninsula Clean Energy and a member of the executive committee there. So I have been affiliated really since the beginning when PCE was being created. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So I just have some comments. I sent my letter and it stands for itself, but I wanted to add a few things. I want to congratulate everybody on getting to this point, formally creating a CCP. And I want to let you know that I so like this idea that I actually made the motion at Peninsula Clean Energy to approve affiliation with CCP, but I also at the time recognized that, well, at PCE we had concerns, we had questions, we felt there were many unknowns. We actually had a study session in mid-January preceding our January board meeting where we chose to affiliate. And so we kind of feel comfortable, but we have some things that we wanted to add. So I made the motion to join, but also the motion to direct our staff to seek to form meaningful policies, foundational policies, moral guiding posts, if you will, that establish really who we are, how we do business. And since I do actually, I'm a retired carpenter. I certainly feel that we all agree we want to have trained and skilled professionals doing our work. I was a union carpenter all my life. I was an organizer for the last 13 years of my career. I know that we need trained and skilled professionals doing this work. So that's why we brought forth the policies that you can read in the body of my letter, but also the sample that was presented, talking about labor and equity and the environment. So I understand that, okay, I covered all that. I want to work collaboratively. You know, I think that there was some feeling that maybe labor was coming on a little bit strong. I just want you to know, we seek to collaborate. That's how we do things. We build community. So we are here to be part of and to help. I really applaud the idea of the formation of the Citizens Committee to Advisory Committee to help with certain issues. We have our own committee at PCE, and it's very helpful. Also, the labor policy should be included when we're seeking proposals. I think we need to make sure that proposers know what we expect, how we do business, and it will save time in negotiating and provide a clear message that we have certain values that we seek to uphold, which benefit the entire community. So that said, the proposal where it would be approved policies job by job or project by project, that really can't stand. It will not work. It will cause fragmentation among the different member boards, agencies. So please don't do that. Please try to find a way to do that. And if, sorry, just a couple more seconds. If this can't be done in time for the new LDS, I think we should seek to have a project labor agreement that would cover that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Next up, we will have Diane Bailey, followed by Stephen Booker.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, directors, and thank you so much for the opportunity to comment. My name is Diane Bailey. I'm with Menlo Spark, a community climate action nonprofit working to accelerate the transition to zero carbon throughout Silicon Valley. First of all, I want to say congratulations on the formation of CC Power. This can leverage the collective buying power of 8 or more CCAs to procure clean energy and energy storage resources. And this is a very important step to help achieve local and state climate goals. And no doubt a lot of work has gone into this so far. So here we are asking you to put some more work into the framework for this new organization. I submitted a recent comment letter together with a number of other environmental advocates urging you to prioritize and swiftly adopt a strong set of sustainability, equity, and fair labor policies. We appreciate very much the white paper that was drafted and the discussion to date. However, we feel strongly that it's essential that before any new procurements are completed, that CC Power must finalize its policies on sustainability, equity, and labor to ensure that the values of the member CCAs as well as their customers are met. Each of the policies that we recommend should be familiar to all of you, and these were echoed for the most part by other commenters. So I won't go into detail on these. Please do refer to our written comments for details. A couple more things that I want to note. It's important to consider all of these policies for formal adoption by CC Power to ensure that this agency will award contracts and negotiate the terms in a way that really supports the values, principles, and policies that many of the member CCAs worked so hard to negotiate and practice in their own business. We're concerned by the suggestion that policies be considered on a project-by-project basis. I think that's option 1. Rather than having CC Power adopt clear policies up front. And that sounds like option 2. As Councilmember Bonilla noted, a project-by-project approach means that individual CCAs will need to spend a lot of resources and effort fighting for inclusion of these policies for each project. And that could really slow down procurement and be counter to the goals of CC Power. If we're serious in our commitment to these values and policies, they really need to be adopted up front for all projects and embedded into the culture of CC Power. By considering and adopting a strong set of policies at the outset, CC Power can ensure that it retains the principles of the founding members as it grows. And we hope to see this effort grow and be replicated in other regions as well. Communities throughout the areas represented by CC Power have strong values supporting sustainability, equity, labor, local businesses, and inclusive and ethical business practices. We urge you to swiftly bring these policies back for formal adoption to guide the important work of this organization. Thank you so much for your consideration. And I really want to commend all of you for this large-scale collaboration to create CC Power. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Next up, we will have Stephen Booker, followed by Alex Landsberg.
Good evening.
Stephen, when you're ready.
Good afternoon, I should say. First and foremost, I want to thank you for this opportunity and the time to speak. But I'm here to strongly recommend that CC Power adopts a workforce policy similar to, if not identical to, Peninsula Clean Energy's workforce policy. Having a workforce policy like Peninsula Clean Energy's will ensure that long duration storage projects are done with a skilled and trained workforce. And when we say skilled and trained workforce, we mean apprentices and journeymen and women that have gone through an apprenticeship from a state certified apprenticeship program. Not only does this ensure fair wages, good clean work, it also ensures that the work will be done right and it will be done safe, not only for the people performing the work, but also for the community at large. I want to just say thank you to Tom and Rick and also Diane Bailey for your words. And I'm in total agreement with them. I like option 2, the adoption of a formal policy statement. Like Diane said, we can't have negotiations on a project by project basis. And on your possible policy principles, on number 4, A2, says use of union construction, labor, and apprenticeship programs for major new construction projects, including project labor agreements where appropriate. I would definitely like to see project labor agreements. However, the use of union labor and apprenticeship programs for major new construction projects, I would think that should say all new construction projects, because I think anything you guys are going to do is going to be a major project. So with that, I'm going to yield my time. And once again, thank you guys and congratulations.
Thank you, Stephen. Next, we'll have Alex Landsberg, followed by Beth Vaughn.
Unmute. Hi. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Landsberg. I'm the Research and Advocacy Director for the San Francisco electrical construction industry. I don't think I can add anything more, or let me rephrase that. I don't think I want to try to do anything more than add what all the fine people, Mr. Tom Enslow, Mr. Booker, Ms. Bailey, Mr. Bonilla have said already. So I absolutely want to echo those comments. I do also want to sort of bring in a perspective of an agency, or at least of some folks in an agency that's considering joining this JPA. San Francisco has had this on the agenda. It's been going through the process of evaluating whether or not to join. Just recently, the city's Public Utilities Commission recently passed a resolution, really echoing, I think, a lot of what the PCE resolution was in terms of compensation and environmental protections and ethical business practices. But I do want to underscore I guess the attention that San Francisco's decision makers started giving these issues when they recognized that these principles were not incorporated directly into the governance structure of the JPA. I think decision makers, as you all recognize, hold their prerogatives very dearly, and I think most of us who are customers of CCAs or live in CCA service areas really want to make sure that the founding principles and the goals that were articulated when these organizations were put together are actually embodied through our purchasing decisions and through the procurement decisions and all these things. So the city's Board of Supervisors Budget and Finance Committee will be considering just the rest of the process in joining the JPA, and I think it would make it much more comfortable to hear that the rest of the decision makers on this agency also share the city's commitment to these values. I appreciate the work of Ms. Jan Pepper in bringing this forward and talking to the rest of you all over here. And now we're looking forward to your next meeting. Really, you're adopting a strong policy that ensures that that we hew to these principles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Next, we'll have Beth Vaughn, followed by Barb Hale.
Hi, Andrea, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well, I'm just here to say congratulations to all of you. I know that this, for some of you, you've been working on this for years, so this is an incredible milestone. I just want to congratulate you and say job well done. You've hit this great milestone, and at CalCCA here, we look forward to supporting you. Both Jim and Tony, give us a call anytime. We're happy to collaborate, and congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Next up, we will have Barb Hale, followed by 350 Silicon Valley. And Barb, whenever you're ready.
I apologize. I was having trouble finding my unmute.
No worries.
Thank you, Andrea. Barbara Hale, San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, Assistant General Manager for Power. Thank you for having this public meeting. Congratulations to CC Power for its formation. We look forward to being members. As Mr. Landsberg mentioned, San Francisco's approval process has included a dialogue on these very issues. I just wanted to flag for the members that San Francisco's approval process is being very clear in the values San Francisco wants brought to the table in decision making with CC Power. And I wanted to share that I've provided to Jim Shetler, the interim GM, our resolution language that includes those statements. And I look forward to an opportunity to talk with the ad hoc committee members that Girish referred to make sure that we're able to influence this process as we go through our approvals to be actual members. So thank you for the opportunity for public comment, and congratulations again.
Thank you, Barbara. All right, next up is 350 Silicon Valley.
I'm having trouble hearing. Are others as well?
Yes.
Yes.
I can't hear anything.
350 Silicon Valley. If you would like to unmute yourself, we've asked you to unmute.
I don't think it's a mute thing.
I think I heard the person say, I'll call back in.
Okay.
Why don't we just give the person 30 seconds here?
You have impressive ears, Girish.
Okay, looks like we lost them. Well, with the exception of 350 Silicon Valley, I don't see any additional Zoom participants that would like to make public comment.
Okay.
I apologize. Looks like we have Bruce Nagel would like to make a comment.
Okay, great.
Bruce?
Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted. We can hear you.
Great. First off, I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to speak to this board on this momentous occasion. I think it's great that this mass purchasing power will be available. It's going to make the efforts of all the CCAs that much more valuable, having local control over their specific part of it, but then a global thing to be able to really get to the large storage facilities and energy facilities that we need. I think it's great that these principles are put into the into your contracts and et cetera in policies. I think it'll be important that they're there, and I'm hoping that the implementation of these works as well as it should. And I also want something out of left field in a sense is that I see that the world is transitioning to the point where we'll have less gas and more electrical energy, and that will mean there'll be some displaced workers. And anything that comes as a possible way to reintegrate these people into the workforce, I think would be especially important. It's come up as an issue in a number of CCA meetings that I've been a part of, especially one in Santa Barbara. So if there is some part that they can contribute to that, that'd be helpful. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to speak. Others have listed all the wonderful things that are part of these policies, and there's not much that I can add to that. Thanks again.
Thank you, Bruce. And looking in our attendee list, I see no additional public comment.
Thank you, Andrea, for handling our first major public comment session here. So we'll move it now. We'll move it back to the board for discussion, and I'll just start with a few comments to just say that our DNA is labor friendly, right? We are all of us here are employees of organizations that are run by elected officials, and all our elected officials, I can say, tend to be very labor friendly. Our boards are very labor friendly, and those are the kinds of policies that we have adopted. So I do appreciate the comments over here. I do appreciate right up front, the statements from Rick Benia about wanting to collaborate with us to create a set of policies that will support the CCA movement. And we are looking for also that widespread support from labor. Thank you, IBW 6 and 617, but just overall to move the CCA movement forward and for us to meet our mission. We look forward to those kinds of collaborations. I'll also just remind the board that we have this ad hoc committee that we will form with Nick, Jan, Jeff, and Matthew. And they are, I'm sure, listening for the input from the public that they will take into consideration and make sure that the policies that they bring for consideration to this board for adoption is also aligned with the timeline for long duration storage. So we will not miss an opportunity to implement the kinds of policies we want into our long duration storage negotiations. So we'll work on that timing. So let me open it up for comments from our board. Just raise your hands and we'll call on you. Okay, Jeff.
Well, I appreciate you asking me to serve on the ad hoc, and I'll do what I can to help in that. I really appreciated the time that people took to write us on this topic. Some of the letters were actually really detailed and gave us a lot of good ideas. So I want to thank people for spending that kind of time. That matters a lot. And I want to just speak to, the last commenter actually spoke to what happens when we disrupt an industry. A lot of us have spoken about fuel shifting from natural gas onto electricity. And I want to make sure we don't forget about that comment. I think that's really important. We've been working very hard in our jurisdiction to do just that. And I think your comment, Bruce, I'm going to take that very close to heart, that we cannot leave the workers behind when we make that shift. And so, and not to take anything away from everyone else's comment, but I want to want to make sure I don't forget that one. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. We'll go to Jan.
Thanks, Garish, and thank you to all the members of the public who came today to share their views and for your passion and interest in this, which I share. I look forward to being on the ad hoc committee with my fellow board members, and I hope that this board today provides direction that we move towards option 2 to develop specific policies that we can consider and adopt in time to influence the long duration energy storage RFP that are proposals that we're looking at now, and that we were able to bring something back to this board expeditiously so that those proposers who are on the short list will know exactly what the expectations are for them. So looking forward to working on this, and glad to know that that we all share these policies or these hopes. And I wanted to respond to one comment. One of the public comments was that the concern that this board is run by unelected board members and consultants. Well, our boards are the electeds, and if they don't like what we're doing, we won't be here anymore. So, and I actually was a former elected, so I know exactly the pressures and concerns that our board members have. And you please know that we absolutely listen to our board members, and we'll be working to make sure that this organization reflects all of our boards and all of our CCAs.
Thank you, Jan. I'll just make one further clarification on that last point you made, which is I don't believe any of us has the authority to enter into any agreement more than $100,000. So all agreements that CC Power negotiates will be taken back to our home board, so to speak. So every local entity will have a chance to, will be actually approving it. And of course, we get the point that we want to have CC Power also have certain policies that the ad hoc committee will be working on to bring back to this board for consideration. Any other comments from board members? Matthew.
Yeah, I'll just, quickly say, I think, the support for having good labor policies makes a lot of sense. And I think, the idea of having, tangible, actionable, ways that we incorporate that. So it's not just sort of general statements, but actually like, this is how we're going to implement it in our processes. Cause that's where, the rubber meets the road. I think where the trickiness might come in is because, we're talking about different priorities as far as, union labor and also, supporting local jobs and then also supporting diverse business interests, and we've got, GO 156 requirements. And so, we'll need to sort of figure out, well, okay, what if it's the choice between, a union non-local business or a local business that maybe doesn't have union workers, or a GO 156 entity, so I think we just need to sort through how we manage that, because we're going to have multiple priorities and they might not always kind of mix, and I think there was a comment about sort of these all being big projects, and maybe that's going to be the meat on the bones, but there may well be situations where there's more distributed type programs like, behind the meter storage or something, where we might actually be looking to work with like a lot of smaller businesses. And, and that's, a spot where I might be like, well, if it's sort of more mom and pop business opportunities, that might look a little bit different than like a big storage project or a big renewable project. So, not to dodge the challenge, but just to say that, we'll want to figure out actionable ways to really address all those different priorities so that we address them all.
Matthew, well said, and I'm very glad you're on the ad hoc committee to bring those sensibilities in to craft something smart that will meet all our interests. And yeah, I'll just add to that. There's also I think all of us, when we were forming, we talked about how can we reinvest locally. And we want to keep CC Power open to, CCAs all over California. So, someone from Southern California may want their local project in Southern California or the Inland Empire. So how do we mesh all this together? There may be projects on the data management side, which, are not labor represented necessarily. So how do we get those kinds of sensibilities into those projects? So I think we have the right set of people to take this into account, bring it back to the board, get input, and looking forward to what gets developed and finally adopted. I don't see any other questions or comments from the board at this point. And this is not an action item, it's for discussion. I do appreciate and thank everyone from the public who has provided great comments, and the board too. And with
Garish, it looks like we got a question in from a member of the public. William would like to know when the ad hoc committee will be meeting and will they be open to the public?
The ad hoc committee is a meeting not open to the public, and they have not set their first meeting date. But all actions of the ad hoc committee, when they present information, will be agendized at an open board meeting here. So, and please do sign up. I will add to William on the website, and you can be automatically added to receiving the agendas, and so you will know when this is agendized for discussion. Okay, good. I don't see any comments from our directors or Q&A. Thank you, Andrea, for catching that. And so let's move on to the last item of 6, item 6J, discussion of any individual member items. Anyone wants to bring up something, either for information or teeing up later that we haven't already talked about? Okay, not seeing anything else.
Mr. Chair, I just want to take this chance to thank you and Tom and Jim and Tony and Andrea for spending a lot of time getting this started. And I know that this isn't like exactly the agenda item, but I figured it was open. I know that you've spent a lot of time getting this started, and I really appreciate your investment here. I hope that this pays many returns for our climate, our environment, and our communities around California. And so thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I think that's the essence of what all of us had in our minds. Yeah, so we have a climate crisis on our hands, and having local communities directly responding to that, I mean, it doesn't get anything better than that. So I think CCAs are awesome, and then having joint CCAs work together. So thank you on behalf of our team. And with that, I think we don't have an item 7 here, so we'll jump to item 8, and that would be adjourning the meeting. Tony, we don't need a motion to adjourn, right? We just adjourn. Okay. All right. So the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all very much for participating in our first CC Power meeting. Looking forward to awesome, great, big, valuable things coming up in our future. Bye.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.